Have you ever seen a case where the entire country seemed to make up its mind before investigators had even finished collecting evidence? Sometimes, a tragedy isn't remembered only because of what happened, but because of the questions that follow. On July 22, 2026, a police encounter in Madison, Wisconsin lasted less than 30 seconds, yet it sparked protests, divided opinions, and a nationwide debate that is still unfolding today. A man named Corey Durell Ruiz lost his life, and now everyone is asking the same question. Was there another way this could have ended? Before we get into today's case, if you enjoy true crime stories that focus on facts rather than speculation, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Crime Chronicle, and click the bell icon so you never miss another case. Now, let's get started. That afternoon, police responded to an incident involving 38-year-old Corey Durell Ruiz. Within a short time, reports of an officer-involved shooting began spreading. Before many people even knew what had happened, cell phone videos recorded by nearby witnesses were already circulating online. Authorities later confirmed that Corey Ruiz had died during the encounter. As more information became available, investigators from the Wisconsin Department of Justice took over the criminal investigation. This is standard procedure in Wisconsin whenever someone dies during an encounter with law enforcement, ensuring that an independent agency reviews the evidence. One challenge investigators immediately faced was the absence of body camera footage. Madison police officers were not wearing body cameras during the incident. Instead, the public's first look at what happened came through videos recorded by ordinary citizens standing nearby. Those recordings showed a fast-moving struggle between Ruiz and several officers. Voices could be heard warning that Ruiz had a knife, while officers attempted to gain control of the situation. Within seconds, the confrontation ended with gunfire. Because the available videos captured only parts of the encounter, different people reached very different conclusions after watching them. Some believed the officers had no choice but to act because they were facing an immediate threat. Others questioned whether deadly force was the only option available. As debates intensified across social media, Corey Ruiz's family found themselves mourning while also watching their loved one's final moments being discussed by millions of strangers. Relatives described Corey as a devoted father and someone who meant far more to them than the headlines suggested. They later retained civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who called for a complete and transparent investigation into the shooting. Police, meanwhile, maintained that their officers responded to a rapidly evolving situation involving an armed individual. They said officers attempted to restrain Ruiz after he came off his bicycle, used tasers in an effort to stop the confrontation, and ultimately resorted to deadly force after the situation continued to escalate. With those two very different perspectives emerging almost immediately, the case quickly became national news. Only hours after the shooting, residents gathered throughout Madison to hold vigils and demand answers. Candles, flowers, and handwritten messages appeared across the city as people struggled to process what had happened. City officials soon held a press conference in an effort to address the community. Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway began by expressing sympathy for Corey Ruiz's family. She acknowledged the grief felt throughout Madison and emphasized that every loss of life involving law enforcement is a tragedy. The mayor assured residents that an independent investigation was already underway and promised transparency as more facts became available. She also urged people to remain patient while investigators worked to determine exactly what had happened. However, the briefing did not last long. As officials continued speaking, protesters walked toward the front of the room carrying signs and chanting for justice. The atmosphere quickly became tense. One protester took the microphone and declared that real power belonged to the people rather than to a badge or a weapon. The chants grew louder, making it nearly impossible for city leaders to continue speaking. Eventually, the press conference ended before officials could answer many of the reporters' questions. The interruption itself became another major story, reflecting just how emotional the community had become only hours after the shooting. By then, the cell phone videos had already reached millions of viewers. National news organizations began carefully reviewing the footage frame by frame, hoping to establish an accurate timeline while investigators continued gathering evidence. Meanwhile, both the Ruiz family and the officers involved faced weeks of uncertainty as the independent investigation moved forward. Before we continue, I'd like you to think about something. Imagine one incident lasting less than 30 seconds, yet leaving behind months of unanswered questions. Could anyone truly understand everything that happened in such a short period of time? As investigators began reconstructing the encounter, they focused on one objective: determining exactly what happened during those critical 28 seconds. That task proved far more complicated than many people expected. Without body camera footage, investigators had to rely on several different sources. They collected cell phone videos from witnesses, interviewed everyone involved, reviewed radio communications, examined physical evidence from the scene, and analyzed forensic findings to build the most accurate timeline possible. According to investigators, officers first encountered Corey Ruiz while he was riding his bicycle on Madison's east side. Within moments, the situation changed dramatically. Ruiz came off the bicycle, and officers immediately attempted to restrain him. Witnesses nearby began recording almost instantly. The videos show multiple officers struggling to control Ruiz on the ground while people nearby watched in confusion. During the struggle, officers repeatedly shouted warnings that Ruiz had a knife. That detail would later become one of the most closely examined parts of the investigation. Police have consistently maintained that the presence of the knife created an immediate danger for the officers involved. However, investigators still had to determine exactly where the knife was, how it was being held, and whether it posed an immediate threat at the precise moment deadly force was used. Those questions cannot be answered by assumptions alone. They require careful examination of every frame of video alongside witness statements and forensic evidence. Before any shots were fired, officers also attempted to end the confrontation using tasers. Investigators later confirmed that the less lethal devices were deployed, but did not successfully stop the struggle. Moments later, an officer fired 3 shots. The entire encounter, from the moment Ruiz left his bicycle until the shooting, lasted roughly 28 seconds. When major news organizations independently analyzed the available videos, they reached a similar conclusion regarding the overall timeline. Their analysis helped explain just how quickly officers were forced to make decisions, while also illustrating why so many questions remain. As those findings became public, the Ruiz family continued speaking out. Standing alongside attorney Ben Crump, they described Corey as a loving father whose life should not have ended that day. They called for accountability if investigators ultimately concluded that the use of deadly force was unjustified. At the same time, police leaders urged the public not to rush to judgment before the investigation was complete. Community members remained divided. Some believed officers had acted to protect themselves during a dangerous confrontation. Others argued that every possible alternative should have been exhausted before deadly force was used. These competing viewpoints fueled continued demonstrations across Madison, where people gathered to honor Corey Ruiz while calling for greater transparency from public officials. As the investigation expanded, every piece of evidence became increasingly important. Investigators compared witness statements with video footage. They studied the physical evidence collected at the scene. They reviewed medical findings and examined the sequence of events from multiple perspectives. Their goal was not simply to determine what happened, but whether the officers' actions complied with Wisconsin law and department policy. That process is still ongoing. And until investigators complete their work, many of questions that continue circulating online simply cannot be answered with certainty. Investigation, what could happen next, and why this case continues to divide public opinion across the country. As public attention continued to grow, the investigation entered a new phase. The Wisconsin Department of Justice continued reviewing every piece of evidence collected from the scene. Detectives interviewed witnesses, examined forensic evidence, reviewed dispatch recordings, and compared officer statements with the cell phone videos that had been shared across the internet. Unlike television crime shows, investigations like this don't end in a few days. Every detail has to be verified before investigators can reach a conclusion. That's why officials repeatedly reminded the public that the process would take time. While investigators worked behind the scenes, Corey Ruiz's family decided it was time to speak publicly. Standing beside civil rights attorney Ben Crump, they shared their grief with the nation. They described Corey as more than the videos people had seen online. To them, he was a father, a son, a brother, and someone who was deeply loved. The family said they wanted one thing above all else: answers. They questioned whether the encounter could have been handled differently and called for accountability if investigators determined that the use of deadly force was not justified. Their emotional press conference touched many people across the country, adding even more attention to an already high-profile case. As the conversation continued, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers also addressed the tragedy. The governor acknowledged the pain being felt throughout Madison and said the public deserved a transparent and independent investigation. At the same time, he encouraged everyone to remain peaceful while investigators completed their work, emphasizing that the facts should guide the outcome rather than speculation or emotion. His comments reflected what many people were hoping for: a careful investigation that would allow the evidence, not public opinion, to determine what happened. Meanwhile, demonstrations continued throughout Madison. Many people gathered peacefully to remember Corey Ruiz, holding vigils, carrying signs, and calling for justice. Others urged the community to remain patient, believing it was important to wait until investigators completed their findings before reaching conclusions. The case also sparked a much larger discussion across the country. Many people questioned why Madison police officers were not wearing body cameras. Some argued that body camera footage could have answered many of the questions that still remain today. Others pointed out that even body cameras don't always capture every angle or fully explain an officer's perception during a rapidly unfolding situation. Still, the absence of that footage has become one of the defining issues in this case. As of today, the investigation remains active. No officer has been criminally charged. The officers involved remain on administrative leave while investigators continue reviewing the evidence. No final report has been released, meaning many of the questions people continue asking simply do not have official answers yet. That uncertainty has allowed rumors and misinformation to spread online. Some social media posts claim the investigation has already reached a conclusion. Others claim officers have been arrested or cleared. At this point, neither claim is supported by the official investigation. For now, the only responsible conclusion is that investigators are still working to determine exactly what happened during those 28 seconds. No matter where someone stands on this case, one fact cannot be ignored. A man lost his life. A family continues to mourn. Police officers are living with the consequences of a split-second decision. And an entire community is still searching for answers. Perhaps the hardest part about cases like this is accepting that not every question can be answered immediately. Justice is often slow. Investigations are rarely simple. And in cases that divide public opinion, patience can be one of the most difficult things to ask for. As we wait for investigators to release their final findings, this case serves as another reminder of how quickly a single encounter can change countless lives forever. Now, I'd like to hear your thoughts. If you had only 28 seconds to understand what happened, do you think that would be enough to reach a fair conclusion? Should every police department be required to use body cameras during interactions with the public? And do you believe cell phone videos alone can ever tell the complete story of a life-or-death encounter? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But please remember to keep the discussion respectful because this case involves real people, real families, and a community still looking for answers. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, subscribe to Crime Chronicle, and click the bell icon so you never miss another true crime story. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe.